Hey gang, and welcome back to another video. Wait, that's not my intro. What's up, you awesome geeks? I'm Hawk, and still not my intro. Shut up again. Nope, that's not it either. What's up, nerds? That's not it either. Jeez Louise. You know what might help? I know it might help. That's so much better. I haven't filmed in a while, so I'm a little rusty. We went to Austin for the Founders Day for the Modern Rogue. Great picnic. Had an amazing time. Camped out there. Came back. And then we went to C2E2. Again, one of my favorite 3-day conventions. But we were there all 3 days. And didn't have much time to film. So it's been almost a month since I've turned this camera on. By the way, I'm Hawk. I make props and costumes. Welcome to my shop. Today, we are going to work on a mask. Well, not a mask. Mask. With periods in there, right? It's we're doing Matt Trakker's helmet for my buddy. Got a couple of prototypes. Let me clear everything off and we'll show you where we're at. I think it may be time for a complete overhaul of everything. And you are way too far away. You're still too far away, but I can zoom in post. This was a prototype. It's okay, right? It does the part. I don't like the gap this has right here. I didn't like the fit, the finish. It was just a little off. So, of course, I modified and did part 2. And part 2 is a bunch of individual parts that are all going to come together. I started with the neck ring. If you look, the neck ring comes down way more in front. So it sits a little more like I think it should. And I modeled this whole thing myself, by the way. I do all of my own modeling. I did it in Lightwave. If you're not familiar with Lightwave, I'm not surprised. It's a very high-end rendering software that just happens to have one of the absolute best modeling softwares I've ever seen. So we got the ring. We've got the muzzle and the vent. And the vent, I kind of like the old, it wasn't Firebirds. Camaros. The old Camaros had these louvered vents for the back. And that's kind of what I modeled it off of, because the car he drives is kind of like that anyway. It's fully breathable. There's no real restrictions. So in a costume, that's super important. The face piece goes inside all the other pieces. But I modeled it, the whole thing independently. And my goodness, these were the worst things I have ever had to try and print. Let me pull up to you and explain these parts real quick. Look at this nonsense I decided to do. This and this were the only things touching the build plate. So they would pop off. I had to print these like 7 times. I went through 3 rolls of filament to get 2 of them. And then I did something smart. Pay no attention to the object on the build plate. That's a spoiler for next month. So this was my build plate. There we go. This was my build plate. Super smooth, it just had a problem with sticking. So I picked up a slightly textured magnetic one. First time, every time. All the prints I've done on it since then have had 0 issues. For those of you wondering, let's see how many you can figure out what it is. So it took me a little bit to get everything printed. But now that it is, we're at the stage where I've got a lot of just little bitty cleanup to do. It's not the best printer in the world, but it does a very good job, so I'm not going to complain. And unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to sand the heck out of this one. Because in my infinite wisdom, I made a bunch of mating surfaces because I wanted actual shadow lines and reveals. So everything gets a light sanding with probably my palm sander. It'll be the fastest. We'll pick that back up in a couple of minutes. going to be a fast video, by the way, but it's going to be a 2-part video. Because just because it's fast for you doesn't mean it's fast for me. Because sanding's actually going to take the better part of a week for me. It's only going to take a couple seconds for you. But assembly's the interesting part anyway. And then we get to paint the whole thing, and that'll be fun too. Although we may paint before we assemble. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. On to sanding. This one's been lightly sanded for everything but the rings. These rings, there's a seam right here, right? That I need to glue together because there's kind of a gap. I want to fill that completely in. But you can see the two of them side by side. And I think this one, so much nicer. It's a little taller. It'll rest on the chest a bit better. Definitely glad I didn't just go with that and I redesigned this. Because this one's just kind of flat. This has got a nice arc. So when it's on the... Ain't nothing glued together. So when it's on the head, it's just going to rest proper. I'm very happy with it. But it does mean we're at the stage where things need to start being glued together. I've got a couple of centering holes or alignment holes here. I don't need the top two. I made a tube and then another tube, and I'm like, well, if I got a tube, I should put a hole in there. I'm going to lightly sand these, and then we're going to glue everything together. We're going to glue these two together. And then this whole thing gets sanded as well. So we're just going to mix up some 5-minute epoxy. I just lightly sanded everything, but if you look, when we put everything together, it's got a bit of a gap on this side. Right? And this side's okay, but there's still a gap too. I'd like to be able to fill those in completely. This gap is probably caused from weird print artifacts, but it is what it is, and we can fix it. All right. So I'm putting this stuff on pretty thick, by the way, because I do not want a chance. Luckily, this helmet has got enough different areas, was printed in enough different orientations that I'm not really worried about it splitting in any particular way. I'll put this together and I'll explain that a little better. There we go. Not helping in the least bit. Should have worn gloves. Probably what my autobiography is going to be called. Should have wore gloves. When in doubt, tape, which I'll probably have to sand off because the glue is going to bond to it. That's okay. This is printed in this orientation, which means all the layer lines are going like this, right? And a 3D printed prop is going to fail along the layer lines. Well, along the seams first, then the layer lines. Since all the layer lines are going this way, and a good chunk of the helmet was printed this way, so they're going this way, it'll be much stronger. It's kind of like plywood. As long as the layers overlap each other, they reinforce. And this does it a lot because these go this way. The faceplate goes this way, which will add another layer of strength to all of this. It's all building on each other. Plus, I made it kind of thick. I wanted it to be a bit durable. I don't know what he's going to use it for, so probably just be a prop piece, but you never know. So I wanted the option. Wait for this glue to dry, and then this thing gets sanded to heck and back. This seam has kind of a gap in it. I did as good as I could, but again, not the best printer in the world. But this is just a little too large for my 3D printer. So we're just going to use standard glazing spot putty. I'm going to fill in the seams and give this whole thing a light coating. I'm going to try and not put any putty on these mating seams, because I want everything to be nice and secure. I'm just primarily worried about this seam right here front, where the two pieces join. And I expect to have to fill in this seam a couple of times. It's going to look fantastic when it's done. And I'm really trying to work this in, by the way. I want to use as little as possible. Because we're going to go over the whole thing with glazing putty and acetone as soon as we're done with this part. .3D prints are rougher than you think, especially in the areas you can't reach. If you're running your hand along them like this, expect to go through multiple gloves or have weirdly colored hands. On this particular print, I'm only worried about where these two pieces join up. I want this seam to be nice and smooth. All right, we're gonna give these overnight. Actually, we're gonna give it till after work tomorrow, so it's got plenty of time to do what it needs to do. We'll pick this back up as soon as I start sanding again. Seam's coming along nicely. I want to glue everything together, and we're going to start with the muzzle and the face piece. These are friction fit. There's a little bit of a gap, so it's going to be just a little loose. Again, 5-minute epoxy. This whole thing is going to be put together with 5-minute epoxy, by the way. We don't need to do anything weird or fancy. Although 5-minute epoxy is probably a little more high-end than most of us are used to using. So these tubes mix the glue in as it goes. Saves me a step. Let that cure. We're going to put the top onto the little ring piece. This is more than likely going to be taped in place while the glue cures. And all this has been lightly sanded. I didn't go crazy on it because I don't think it really needs it. Doesn't need a lot of pressure either. It just needs to hold it in place. So now there's a little gap all along this. A lot of prints have these. I'm just going to use this to fill in a lot of that gap. Let that cure. I don't want to glue this neck plate or the back of the head plate in yet, because I want to glue this front part onto the sides, so I know everything has enough room to to flex like it needs to. So as soon as this is all done, we'll come back and glue the rest of it in a few seconds. All right, now the mask is in place, we're going to glue all along this edge and all along this edge. And push it down just a little more. That is exactly where I want it. Got tape on the inside that should hold everything in place. So yeah, I'm just going to put a bead of glue along here and a bead of glue along here. All right, now we leave it. Again, it says 5 minutes. I tend to give it half an hour. This looks fantastic. I'm very, very happy with it. So we're now at the point where I'm going to glue the edge. I really wish they sold more these on their own. The little mix-in tube things. And then I glue the ridge onto the rest of the helmet. Luckily this glue is very thick and viscous, and it doesn't flow very well. So it stays pretty much where I put it. I'm going to leave it overnight, let the glue completely glue, and then cover the whole thing in glazing putty and acetone. So it's not the morning. It's still the same night. But the glue has had time to, the epoxy has time to epoxy. So I'm going to fill in all of these little gaps I've got, mainly along this front edge, with glazing putty. Just like we did for the edge here. I just take a moment to say I am super happy with how this turned out. I thought it was going to be neat. I didn't think it was going to be this neat. Never a big M.A.S.K fan. Wasn't one of my shows. I prefer Galaxy Rangers. But I always thought it was interesting. M.A.S.K had better toys. That's for sure. I don't even think there were Galaxy Ranger toys. Looks so nice. I'm going to pull you closer so you can get a better look at this. It's still a little messy, right? But you get a rough idea of how he's looking. I am super happy with this. This, what I'm doing right now, would be next to impossible to do with a visor on. Alright. Now we leave it overnight. And now all the seams are filled in, but this looks kind of rough. So everything gets gloves and a light sanding. I know, right? I am a real boy. So we're just going to use, I got 80 grit. If you're gentle with your sandpaper, doesn't matter what grit you use. So I'm going to give everything a light sanding, and then we're going to probably go over everything with acetone and glazing putty. All right, bulk of the sanding's done, right? Next we're getting into glazing putty and acetone. I'm gonna have a respirator on for this, so I'm gonna explain what I'm doing now. I have as the name would indicate, acetone and glazing putty. Acetone is, or glazing putty is acetone soluble, which means you can dilute glazing putty with acetone. And I do a very thin mixture. I would say, well, you'll be able to see what I'm doing. Speaking of which, I need to go grab a cup and a stick, and I'll be right back. I use an exceptionally thin mixture. Great for my audio. It's mostly acetone with a little bit of glazing putty. Full respirator, fresh cartridges, let's get you somewhere a little better. There we go. I use full respirator, fresh cartridges. I'm gonna have glasses on, and I just coat the entire thing in glazing putty and acetone. By the time I'm done, with the bottom, the top is already dry. I start at the top and work my way down, because that way gravity works with me instead of against me. So that's all I'm going to do now. We're going to reset you, and we're going to go into a time lapse. since we're sanding, I figured I'll talk a couple of seconds about sanding. You see the dark that's right in here? That's a low spot. So I want to sand until that goes away. And when everything's a nice, even, uniform color, I know I'm probably not going to see much in the way of layer lines. So that's what I'm going for when I'm sanding. Everything to be a nice, uniform color. The preview of everything together. I got lots more sanding to do. Probably going to go sanding and then a couple more coats of acetone glazing putty, sanding glazing. It's probably going to take me about a week to finish this all the way off. We do not have time for that. So next week, we're going to do the paint. I know. Look at that. That looks pretty okay. I'm exceptionally happy with how this thing turned out. Nothing's really in. It's all just kind of taped on. But like I said, next week we're going to finish it up. Paint, visor, foam on the inside. We should be able to get it 100% next time. Thanks for making it to the end. I appreciate it. If this is your kind of thing, maybe think about sticking around. Did you ever watch M.A.S.K? If you did, what was your favorite helmet or vehicle? Let me know in the comments. I like how he's turning out. I hope you do too. Again, thanks for making it to the end. I'll see you next time.